everyone, welcome to Ask an Armorer. My name's Kia, and today we're going to have a slightly different video than usual. See, over the course of my entire armory career, I've got a lot of questions about how I became an armorer, what it's like being an armorer, what do you need to do to become an armorer, etc, etc, etc. So I thought I would sit down. As you can probably hear, it's a nice thunderstormy, rainy day outside right now, and just sit down and have a little chit-chat about that. I'm also delighted to announce that I'm starting a new mini-series here called Ask Another Armorer, where I will sit down with some of my other armory colleagues and chit-chat with them about the exact same subjects. Hopefully this will give you a better idea of what it takes to become an armorer, or just what an armorer is and what it is that we do for those curious. So without further ado, grab yourself a nice cup of tea or whatever other beverage you would like, and let's settle in and have a chat. So first, just a little bit about me and where I'm at right now with the armory. I am currently ranked both nationally in both Canada and the States, meaning that I can work up to national level tournaments in either country. And hopefully, once COVID is over, I will go back to doing so because I miss it a lot. Now, obviously I didn't start at the national level. I got started with armory pretty close to at the same time that I started fencing back in 2008 or so, and just sort of continued to work my way up from there. I really started getting into club stuff in about 2013 or 14 when I was on the varsity team at university, and then it was after I graduated that I really got into, I was able to volunteer at a Pan Am Games, and sort of that was my first real taste of big tournament armory. And then from 2017 on, I became nationally ranked in the States and have recently gotten my national ranking in Canada. So how did I get actually started doing armory? This is actually a really funny story that I enjoy telling. So it was my second ever practice fencing, like not second tournament, not second year, second practice. I still barely knew how to stand up straight while in an on-guard position. And yet somehow I walked in and my then coach looked me up and down and she said to me, "Kia, you're going to be an engineer someday, aren't you?" And I was rather taken aback because I really didn't know what she meant, but she was correct. I was at that time planning on going into mechanical engineering with school, so I said yes. She sort of nodded knowingly to herself and said, "Great, you're now our armorer." And at that point I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. I understand that the words you are saying are part of the English language, and I have no idea what they mean. Frankly, I still don't entirely know what she means or what she saw, but she called it very, very correctly given where I am now. Now, I'll have to admit at this point, it wasn't a super smooth sailing trip the entire time to get here. The really big issue that I came across and struggled against a lot in my early career especially, really probably about the first 7 or 8 years of me doing my own armory, was the complete lack of instructions, mentors, anything like that really beyond a couple books that I found, and obviously the actual technical requirements for that are laid out by the FIE. As I was learning, obviously I had some coaches that were able to teach me a thing or two here or there, but nothing that was just a sit down, let's work through all of the material in a methodical way. I was really on my own for most of that. But that was the tough part. I had to do a lot of just sort of, well, it's broken already, what more can I really do to it? And armed with that attitude and a multimeter, I just kind of had to start going at it and seeing what happened. So on one hand, I'm a little grateful for it now because it means I have made a ton of mistakes and know how to avoid or fix them. But on the other hand, it would have made my life a lot easier had there been somebody or something around to help me out with that. So that was really the big thing that I struggled with, and why I've started this YouTube channel, so that hopefully I can provide a little bit of the instruction for someone else that I never was able to get. There was just a really good flash of lightning outside. This is very exciting. ambiance. Anyways, sorry, getting back to the video. In a moment. So, with a bit of my story out of the way, I'm going to talk a little bit now about if somebody else wants to become an armorer and sort of where to start. Obviously, I am biased. Go ahead and check out the rest of my videos that I have on this channel. But really, the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask questions, get your hands dirty, and just start. Armorers tend to really love sharing their knowledge and expertise with somebody who has shown that they want to learn. So if you have the opportunity, like if you have a club armorer or you're at a tournament and you see that the armorers aren't working, don't try to interrupt them when they're doing checks or working. That is rude. But if they're just kind of waiting around, it's a bit of a quiet period, feel free to go up to them and maybe ask for some pointers. A lot of them would be willing to sit down and chat with you about that. But really, grab yourself a multimeter, grab yourself some broken stuff, and see what you can do. Another question that I've got here is what surprised me most when I started. And really, frankly, a lot of it isn't hard. Like, there's no individual aspect of Armory that I can look at and say, this thing is hard to do. Because the circuitry's not that tricky. Like, it's a pretty basic circuit that is involved with most of this. It's just there's a lot of it. Like, there's all three weapons, there's all the adjacent gear for each of the weapons, there's all the scoring stuff and reels if you decide to get into that, not to mention the actual setup and everything of a tournament. But each individual aspect is pretty manageable. It's just there's a lot to learn. So as a addendum to that last question, that was sort of Armory in general, what surprised me most when I worked my first tournament? And that, I would have to say, is the hours. Like, I always knew that all officials had long days. Like, you're there all day, regardless of what kind of official you are. But what I didn't realize is that armorers tend to be first in and last out, because we need to make sure everything's working before everyone else can start. And we need to stay until the end to make sure things stay working, and then do a final check and turn off scoring machines, etc. So when I work a tournament, particularly a really large one like a NAC or a Canada Cup, it's not uncommon for me to start my day at or even slightly before 7 a.m. and for me to work until 8 or 9 p.m., sometimes even later, depending on what's happened during the day and if things are running late. Ooh, so now we're getting into the section where we talk about the fun stuff, all my toys. I mean tools, but we all really beat as toys. So, what's in my toolbox? So first off, I actually have two main toolboxes. There's my Armory dedicated one, and then there's my general toolbox. So my Armory Toolbox is the one that I can grab and go to a tournament, and I am pretty much prepared for most things that I've come across as like major issues. So in that one I have all of my micro screwdrivers, I've got spare parts, I have various Allen keys, I have my weights, I have shims, basically all of the tools that you get from like a general hardware store for fencing, as well as the specific stuff. And then my other toolbox is all of my other tools. That's, you know, the power tools that are too large or I don't find necessary to travel with to a tournament. Because if you need power tools at a tournament, something else has gone wrong. As well as, especially if I'm flying, I just don't want to deal with trying to get that past security. Like, that just doesn't sound like a fun time. So my big tool, or my other toolbox, is for all the stuff that I don't typically use for fencing, but do need for general around the home repairs, renovations, crafting, that kind of stuff. So now let's talk about wishlist tools. I mean, once you get into this, you start getting so many wishlist tools just because it's always fun to look at other people's toolboxes and see what goodies that they have that you might want. And so I am rather confident in my toolbox now that I can handle 99% of cases that come up, or I could find a workaround. But I have found myself wanting things like a small hand anvil, which would be very useful if I find there's like a ding and a bell guard that I would really like to just kind of flatten out. or something like that. So again, it is possible to do that without a small hand anvil, but it would make that task a lot easier. So things like that, small things that are rather specific to jobs that just look like a lot of fun to have. Now, my favorite tool is probably going to be a surprise. It is actually this itty bitty teeny tiny little crowbar, because it's itty bitty teeny tiny and amuses me to no end. And I promise this is actually useful. This is great for when I am working on those plated pieces and I need to get underneath just the edge in order to do something for grounding work. I can prop it up on this and not worry about my fingers getting pinched. However, the tool that I use the most is probably a toss-up between my Allen key and my micro screwdrivers. It's just can't really do a lot of work on most weapons without one or the other of those, so I just constantly find myself reaching for them and always have them really close at hand when I'm doing anything. And as for what I actually carry at a tournament, well, this is my Armory Belt. So as you can see, it's kind of funky and definitely not a traditional tool belt. This actually started life as a cosplay accessory for various steampunk events, but then I realized that it was perfect for the size that I needed for tournaments, because in it, obviously you see here, my Allen key just hangs on its own, so it's really easy to grab. I also have my pliers, pair of small scissors, some wire cutters, my micro crowbar, a utility knife, and a couple other fun things that are down there. When I'm actually at a tournament, I typically throw, you know, a permanent marker and a pencil and a pen in here as well, because you never know when you might need one of those. So now this is the section I'm going to call Getting to Know Me, which is questions that I've gotten about my life outside of Armory, because as much as I do love fencing and spend a ton of my time in the Armory and in the Sal, I do actually have to do other things with my life. So I do have a full-time job. I actually work in donor relations and communications, and my other really big hobby is crafting, sewing. I'll make my own clothes sometimes. If you know the term, I do a lot of cosplay, and I just really enjoy going to those events, showing off what I've made, admiring what other people have made, and yeah, it's a really great creative outlet. So in my downtime, you'll find me either working on that or actively drawing and designing. And actually, I just finished this funky witch's hat for a Halloween event that I've got coming up. And then when I'm not working on either of those, as you could see, I do have a lot of plants that I enjoy taking care of. I have a couple cats that are fun to hang out with, or, you know, just exploring my city. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and seeing what kind of cool, funky events are there, hanging out with my friends, all of that sort of stuff. So this is the one that everyone, I'm sure, is going to try to figure out, whether you're a student or you're working full-time or you have family or any of those other commitments. We all know that it can be a balancing act. And what I have tried to do is, I mean, first off, I'll fully admit it can be really tough, especially when the season is in full swing. I'll be working 3 out of 4 weekends every month, as well as, you know, trying to keep up with my full-time job, etc., etc. So, yeah, it can be tough. So, from the start, if you're not comfortable with the level that is being asked of you, you can always say no and just take the time that you need for yourself. I mean, if you burn yourself out, you just won't be able to do anything. So it's better to take more breaks when you need them rather than being forced to take a much longer break due to mental health problems. So for me, what I try to do is set aside a certain number of vacation days every year, and that's it. Like, that's what I'm going to use for fencing, and everything else I reserve for personal vacations, breaks, seeing my family, etc., as well as I do try to take advantage of existing long weekends, so that if I know there's already going to be some time off from work, I can utilize that time to catch up on everything else that I need to take care of. Also, my non-fencing friends have just kind of accepted that they don't see me basically from October to February, but that's fine, it's winter, nobody wants to go outside anyways, it's fine. So my ultimate goals for Armory professionally, I would love to work at Olympics. That would just be the coolest experience, and I would love to be able to watch that level of fencing up close and personal. On a personal level, my goal is to really become a mentor to as many people as possible and just really help grow Armory and make it generally much more accessible so that we can continue to have many more generations of great armorers come up. And finally, I'm going to finish off this video with a couple of shock factor questions. So the first one is, what is the weirdest problem that I have ever come across when fixing fencing stuff? And that had to be at one point, it was at varsity club practice, and some of the fencers came in with a scoring machine that was giving a really, really weird signal. Basically, it was on epee, and whenever they had a simultaneous hit, the lights and sound of the scoring machine would stay on for a full 30 seconds. It wouldn't respond to any input either from the machine, the buttons on the machine, or from a remote. The only thing that you get to, the only way to make it quiet would be to just pull the power plug, which obviously is not very useful when you're trying to have practice. So I had never seen this before. I messaged a few of my friends in Armory, and none of them had seen it before, and eventually I contacted the manufacturer, and they hadn't seen it before, but said that, okay, we can, if you want, you can ship it to us and we'll troubleshoot, diagnose, all of that good stuff. Luckily, one of my friends who is also an armorer came in and took a look at it. He's also an electrical engineer, and he's like, you know what, let's try the very basics of fixing stuff, and let's unplug it and plug it back in. So we opened up the back of the case, we disconnected the cable that connects the lighting panels to the actual motherboard, and then reseated it, and it was fine. So there you go. Apparently it had just gotten jostled enough that something was very slightly out of alignment and was just making it unhappy, and we just needed to put it back. So luckily, I did not have to pay for shipping and get everything fixed like that. So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind for next time. And then finally, the worst problem that I've had to deal with at a tournament. So the one that definitely by far takes the cake, and I'm sure many of you out there will remember this one, is I was at a NAC, and not one, but two pipes in the ceiling burst, flooding a full quarter of our setup piece 2 days in a row. Yeah, I didn't get a lot of sleep those first couple of nights as we were trying to scramble to save everything and then reset things up in time for fencing to start the next day. But you know, good experience, and now I've got a lot better at crisis management after that kind of thing. Thankfully though, we did come out of that one that nobody was injured and there was no permanent long-lasting damage, because thankfully we were still in the venue. We were able to address it immediately and had some of those really big garbage carts on hand to just roll under the deluge and at least start catching some of it. So as frustrating as it was to deal with, it could have been a lot worse. So that's all the questions that I've had so far. I hope this illustrated a bit more for everybody out there about what the life of an armorer is like. And if you have any more, please let me know. You can ask me in the comments or over on my Instagram at Ask an Armorer. If you like this, feel free to share it, like it, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!